So here's a question that probably hits pretty close to home for a lot of us. Can your old job legally control your new one? We're going to dive deep into this by looking at a wild, century-old legal case that, believe it or not, still has a huge impact on our careers today. Just imagine this for a second. You've quit your job. You are so ready for that next big move. But what if your old company could legally block you from working for a competitor? Or even from starting up your own thing? That little clause you barely remember signing in your contract? Yeah, that could suddenly become a massive roadblock. It's a real and, honestly, pretty scary thought for a lot of people. All right, so here's our game plan. We're going to start with why this is such a modern problem. Then we'll get into the nitty-gritty of what a restrictive covenant actually is. After that, we're taking a trip back in time to meet a lawyer and his clerk whose fight led to something called the reasonableness test. And finally, we'll connect all the dots and see what the legacy of their story means for you. Okay, first up, the modern workplace dilemma. At its core, this whole thing is really about a fundamental clash. It's your right to go out and earn a living versus your old company's right to protect its business. It's this constant tug of war, and it's happening more and more in today's world. Let's make this super real. Say you're a software developer or a great salesperson. A rival company down the street offers you a dream job. Better pay, better title, the works. It seems like a no-brainer. But this is the exact moment when that clause, the one buried on page 12 of your contract, can suddenly rear its head. And it's no surprise that regulators are starting to wonder if these clauses have gone a little too far. So what is this hidden clause we're talking about? Well, that brings us right to Section 2, the restrictive covenant. That's the fancy legal term for the tool that's right at the heart of this whole issue. Okay, so what is it? Put simply, it's a part of your contract where you promise not to compete with your employer for a certain amount of time after you leave. You've probably heard it called a non-compete clause. The whole point is to stop you from walking out the door one day and taking all your inside knowledge straight to the competition the next. And look, this is what makes it so tricky. Both sides kind of have a point, right? On one hand, the company invested in you, they shared secrets with you, they introduced you to their clients. Of course they want to protect that. But on the other hand, you need to be able to use your own skills and experience to build your career and, pay your bills. It's two completely reasonable goals on a direct collision course. So, how do the courts handle this? How do you find the balance? Well, to understand that, we have to jump in a time machine. We're going to see how a dispute between a small-town solicitor and his clerk ended up creating the rules we still live by. This is the story of a landmark case from 1921 called Fitch v. Dewis. So picture it. Tamworth, England, way back when. There's a local lawyer, Mr. Fitch, and his top clerk, Mr. Dewis. Now, Dewis had worked for Fitch his entire life. He knew every client, every case, every single secret of the business. And because of that, Mr. Fitch made sure his contract had a very, very powerful clause in it. And this was it. The clause said that Mr. Dewis could never practice as a solicitor within 7 miles of the center of town. And get this. The restriction was for an unlimited time. We're not talking a year or 5 years. We're talking forever. For a guy whose whole life was in that town, this was basically a lifetime ban from his own profession. And yeah, this all went down in 1921. You're probably thinking, okay, 100 years ago, why are we talking about this? Well, the really interesting part is what the court did when faced with this seemingly insane lifelong restriction. And that brings us to the real heart of the story, the reasonableness test. See, the court didn't just look at the contract and say, well, you signed it. Instead, they came up with this really smart and simple framework to figure out if a non-compete clause is actually fair or if it just goes way too far. They boiled it all down to 3 basic questions. First, does the old employer have a real, legitimate business interest to protect? Think trade secrets or client lists. Second, is the geographic area of the ban fair? Is it just covering their actual business area, or is it ridiculously broad? And third, is the time limit reasonable? Are we talking a few months or forever? So what happened when they applied this test to Mr. Dewis? Now you'd think a lifelong ban would get thrown out immediately, right? Well, plot twist, the court said it was reasonable. Why? They said Mr. Fitch's interest, his client relationships, was totally legit. The 7-mile radius was fair because it was just his town, and this is the kicker. Since clients often stick with their solicitor for life, the court decided a lifelong ban was actually necessary to protect the business. Wild. Which finally brings us to the legacy of it all. How does a decision about a lawyer in a tiny English town over 100 years ago have anything to do with your job as a coder or a marketer or whatever you do today? Well, the things a business needs to protect have changed, but the idea of protecting them hasn't. Back in 1921, it was a physical list of clients in a book. Today, it's a massive customer database, secret source code, or that confidential 5-year business plan. The assets are different, but the principle is exactly the same. And that right there is the key takeaway from all of this. That simple 3-question reasonableness test. Is there a good reason? Is the location fair? Is the time fair? That is still the fundamental framework, the gold standard that courts use right now to decide if the non-compete clause in your contract is legit. So I'll leave you with this question. The next time you get a job offer and they slide that contract across the table, are you just going to flip to the last page and sign, or are you going to pause and look for that one little covenant, the one that might just have the power to shape the rest of your career?